A new report co-authored by Northern BC group Conservation North is raising questions about the use of old-growth logs in biomass pellet production. British company Drax owns 4 pellet mills in Northern BC. They produce wood pellets that are used to power biomass energy plants. Conservation North says logs and logging waste from old-growth forests in the north are ending up at Drax mills. For more, I'm joined by Conservation North Director Michelle Connolly. Good morning, Michelle.
Hello.
How do you know that wood from old-growth forests is ending up at Drax-owned mills?
So all logs harvested in BC have to be evaluated for their quality and volume before they're cut into products, and this is called scaling. And the Ministry of Forest takes the information from scaling each log and uses it to invoice the forest companies because they pay a fee to the government for taking the trees. So the data from scaling are submitted by the industry to the Ministry of Forest electronically, and then invoices are calculated and issued to industry via something called the harvest billing system. So the harvest billing system is a public record of all logs coming from public and private lands in BC. And we use this invoicing system to figure out the volume and weight of all material arriving at Drax pellet mills from logging operations in 2023. So that's logs or wood chips or hogged tree material, as you said. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to know what was going to the Burns Lake, Houston, Smithers, and Meadowbank Drax pellet plants. What material came from what supplier and in what volume, and importantly, what timber mark each load arrived with. So a timber mark is a code stamped on each log that identifies the geographic origin of the timber, among other information. So, yeah.
Okay, so you had to look at all of this data, and then what did you discover?
Yeah, so we discovered that Drax continues to source logs from cut blocks containing large areas of old-growth forest and priority deferral areas, which are the rarest old-growth forests in BC. So 2 years ago, the BC government pulled together a technical advisory panel to identify and map all of BC's oldest forests and then identify what were the rarest and most vulnerable forest types among those. Those are called priority deferral areas. And what we discovered is that logs that are feeding Drax's mills are coming from old growth, and they're coming from priority deferral areas.
And how much of this is logs versus chip/piles or sawmill waste?
It's actually several thousand loads of logs. So 3,316 logs arrived with timber marks that were at least 10% corresponding with cut block areas that were old growth. And over 600 logs came from timber marks where at least a third of the total area was classified as priority deferral. So it is lots of loads of logs.
How significant would you say is Drax's use of old-growth logs when compared to the rest of the industry?
Yeah, that's a really good question. To be honest, it's a smaller part. The real problem is that old-growth priority deferral areas are being logged for other products as well. Drax is part of the food chain in all of this, so they are taking logs from priority deferrals, but West Fraser Mills and Canfor is actually doing the logging of these old growth deferral areas, and they're obviously the most valuable stuff is going to them, not Drax.
There has been a lot of attention paid to Drax operations in BC. How much does that focus take away from the other companies that are harvesting in these old growth areas?
Big time. Yeah. So like I said, it's other companies doing the logging. Drax is really just obtaining what they can from what comes out. And on top of that, there's a really insidious system called a grade 4 credit system in place where for every load of what we call grade 4 logs, so they're pulp grade or lower quality logs, harvested by a company like Canfor or West Fraser and delivered to an end user like Drax, another load of logs of any quality can be logged in addition. So, for example, for the 411 loads of logs that Canfor brought to a Drax mill, it gets 411 logs of any quality for itself. So it's possible that every load of logs that has arrived at a Drax pellet mill under the grade 4 credit stream has enabled an equivalent volume of logs to be harvested again. So that multiplies the scale of the impacts. And of course, that's Canfor and West Fraser and the other companies getting those extra logs because they're doing the service of bringing Drax logs.
These, however, are all legitimate government policies, provincial policies, and the companies are simply following the rules. So what changes do you want to see from the government level?
We shouldn't be logging priority deferral areas. The BC government really mishandled that whole process. They put in the work and effort to actually identify and map the rarest old growth. And now many of these are getting logged. So listeners can do a search for something called Forest Eye. You just type Forest Eye into your search engine, and you'll get this great interactive map that shows where all the priority old growth deferrals are getting logged in BC, and it's quite scary. And the question is, BC's made a promise that we're going to do this paradigm shift and we're going to prioritize biodiversity and ecosystem health. And it's very unclear how that's going to happen if they're continuing to allow the rarest old growth in BC to get logged.
What are the immediate steps you'd like to see?
The Ministry of Forests should simply shut down logging in all priority deferral areas. We're talking about areas that have been in development for millennia. This is where endangered species use. These are the most precious habitats. It's pretty unreal that the government put all the effort into identifying and mapping these areas, and now they're just letting them get logged.
And what would you like to see from companies like Drax?
Drax should absolutely be aware of the context they're working in. From our perspective as a group that thinks that all primary forests are important, it was egregious enough that BC is allowing logging of any primary forest at all. So that's any natural forest of any age. I think that in itself was really shocking to British, energy consumers, the ones that are charging their iPhones, using energy from our forests partly. And I think this is especially shocking to consumers over there from what I understand about the responses to the reporting that's happened. So I believe there's a way for us to put pressure on the BC government to at least stop logging in priority deferral areas and start doing better management in areas that have been already logged in the past.
Michelle, thanks very much for your time today.
Thank you.
That's Michelle Connolly, Director of Conservation North. Now, we have requested an interview with Drax for their response to this new report. We hope to bring you that conversation on tomorrow's show.